Hey everybody, and welcome to Doing Stuff with Dave. Today I'm going to be building a prop from the 1982 film Blade Runner. It's a traffic control device. It's a cross now, don't walk sign. It only appears in the movie for about a minute, but it's really cool. I was inspired to make this prop by a video I saw called Blade Runner Signs of the Times. It's an interview with the guy who created all the graphic images for the movie. So let's get started. The first thing I did was import the graphics into SketchUp. I then traced them and modeled them for 3D printing. The idea was to print out stencils that I could use to transfer the images to vinyl and then the inside of the illuminated glass of the sign. I made everything about 1/2 scale, considering this piece to be a prototype. After consulting the reference photo and footage from the movie again, I began cutting down foam board, which would be used as the housing for the sign. While using a table saw to do this might seem like overkill, it was the easiest way to get perfectly straight cuts. Smaller pieces and angled cuts were done more traditionally with an X-Acto knife and a ruler. I then fitted all the pieces together with painter's tape to make sure that everything fit as expected. I used PET plastic for what would become the illuminated front of the sign. This is the same material I used for my 3D printer enclosure. Conveniently, I had a piece left over. I used my 3D printed stencils to transfer the images to the release paper on the black vinyl. I then took an X-Acto knife and traced my lines. Well, I thought that was going to be really tedious, and it was. So I've made my cuts, and now what I have to do is pull out the footprint and everything outside of the arrow. I used one of those work mats with a tacky surface. That made this step much easier than it would have been otherwise. Next, I removed the release paper from the back of the vinyl and cleaned the PET with some isopropyl alcohol to remove any oil or dust. I'd never worked with vinyl before, and I made a couple of rookie mistakes. If you look at the vinyl from the camera's perspective, you can see that it's not laying flat. When I placed the PET against it, I ended up with some air bubbles that I had difficulty removing. I should have purchased one of those little rubber rollers you can use to press them out. What I did do is flip everything over when I was done, pop some of the bubbles with an X-Acto knife, and press them out again. Using 120 grit sandpaper, I scuffed up the face of the PET so that it would diffuse light better and so that you couldn't see the inside of the box. I wasn't completely happy with that approach, so I followed up with my Dremel sander, and that did the trick. I'm going to start by priming the piece with Plasti Dip, which is a rubberized coating that will add some texture to the piece. I'm going to hit a few spots with silver. I'm going to try to expose that silver later to make it look like weathered metal. The front of the piece will be painted with this charcoal gray color. I'll mask the front of the piece off, and then I'll paint the back of the piece with this yellow color. Now I know what you're thinking. What is up with those shoes? No, that wasn't it. But won't the spray paint eat the foam? It's true, there are solvents in spray paint that will deteriorate the foam, but if you hold the can 12 to 14 inches away and spray on light coats, those solvents will flash off before they reach the piece, leaving only the paint behind. I'm really happy with the way this came out as a base for weathering the piece. And remember, I've got these transition strips that are going to go between the yellow and the gray, which you can see in the reference photos. I threw some sand and grit on the piece as I was painting it to build up some additional layers of dirt and texture. And in particular, I stood the piece up on its side, and where this bullet is intended to have grazed the piece, I threw some sand in there and then dumped it back out after I painted it. And I think that pretty effectively gives the look of something that grazed some metal, and I can refine that a little bit further when I do the final weathering. So at this point, I need to let the paint cure, and then I can start the weathering. Although I could just cure the paint with the heat from my lightsaber. I think I have a good base now for doing the final weathering. One of the things I could have done better is I could have sealed these raw edges here so that they held the paint a little better. I'm going to use some acrylic paint, match this color, same with the black, and try to conceal that. These 3D printed parts need to be weathered pretty heavily. I believe they were intended in the movie to maybe be some kind of sensors that tell the device when to change from letting people cross to telling them to wait, that kind of thing. Pretty happy with my bullet strike there. I think that looks pretty convincing. So I'm going to go back and start doing some of this kind of thing. I did a test area here where I just added some dirt as though it's building up behind this transition. Need to do some drips down from areas like this as though there's rust and things like that. So I'm going to get started and see what we end up with. So this is where I went back and tried to seal up some of those raw edges that I mentioned a moment ago. And then I moved on to some dry brushing with some blacks and some grays. I was trying to create the look of dirt and deterioration that had occurred over the years. So I sealed up those edges a little better. It's still not perfect. I could have done a better job from the beginning. But I went back after I did that and I did some weathering. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And I'm at a point now where I think I can start working on the electronics. By no means do I consider myself an expert in electronics, but through a Google search and some help from my son, I was able to come up with a simple circuit using some LEDs and resistors that simply kept both sides of the sign illuminated. The sign in the movie alternates blinking from red to green, and it talks to you as well, but I was just looking for solid illumination for my purposes. I placed a divider inside the housing to keep the two colors separate. You'll notice that the green LEDs appear very blue in this particular shot. I wasn't able to correct this with my software, but this is what they actually look like in real life. You'll also notice that I made a stand from some PVC and spray paint so I could mount the sign in its final resting place, which is my music room. I'll post information and links below on some of the materials that I used to make this prop. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and feel free to share this video with people you don't like. We'll see you next time.